The price of food is going up, the price of water is going up, the price of gas is going up, and so stimulus checks have to be sent out. It's the thing that must happen. It is something that President Biden must do. No doubt about this. So guys, on this channel, I always do my very best in providing you with the most up-to-date and reliable stimulus check information. On this channel, I will always provide you with this most up-to-date news. This video takes hours and hours to make, everybody, because I'm going through every resource to make sure I provide you with the most reliable, accurate stimulus check information. Stimulus payments are a $475 million tax relief program. It was unveiled by New York lawmakers on September 8th. It's seeking to improve affordability for the low-income residents. And according to state officials, eligible New Yorkers who receive the Empire State Child Credit or the Earned Income Credit, for example, guys, on your 2021 tax return will actually see your check by the end of October. That means a stimulus check. If you live in New York, you'll get a stimulus check by October. And no, I know that many of you guys don't live in New York. So here's the latest news on some other states. Governor Hochul sent a statement with this relief package or making a good commitment to help out the New Yorkers through the nationwide affordability crisis. Even governors are admitting there's an affordability crisis. This program will put money back into the pockets of people, nearly 2 million New Yorkers, and the checks are $300. These $300 checks can help you pay for food, groceries, and even gas. So, eligible residents do not need to take any action to receive the checks because they'll be sent out by the state automatically. The Department of Taxation and Finance doesn't have a specific schedule or delivery schedule for when these checks should arrive, but the agency officials said they should be delivered very, very soon, on or before October 31st. And the New York Assembly Speaker has also told reporters that this put money back into the pockets of hardworking families who have been struggling with the already high cost of childcare, along with the rising cost of food at the grocery and the rising cost of the gas pump. This all proves to the fact that President Biden has to do something for the American people, and the only thing for him to do is send out stimulus checks. If you guys agree, then be sure to continue watching because it only gets more important. There are those people that might have been sent those funds straight back into the pockets of the 1% and big corporations instead of working families. It's not what the government does. Assistant Comptroller also told reporters that the state has working overtime to get checks to eligible taxpayers, and the relief plan, which went into effect July 1st, includes a pause on the planned gas tax increase at least until January 2023. The Illinois residents who paid taxes in 2021 and made under $200,000 if they filed individually, or under $400,000 filing jointly, all qualify for this check. Individuals receive $50 a check, and couples will receive $100. These $100 can actually go a long way because they're actually for each per dependent. Illinois residents who paid state property taxes last year on their primary residence in 2020 are also eligible for the rebate. But officials have said that if you haven't already received a refund, a physical check will be mailed to the address on your tax return. For residents receiving both property and income rebates, the payments will come in a single deposit or check. If you believe you are eligible for a refund check and don't receive one yet, you have until October 17th to get your stimulus money. Top Democrats are urging Congress and President Biden to sign executive orders into law for stimulus checks. Now, by taking executive action, millions of people are going to receive additional crisis relief. And 3 Democratic senators want President Biden to go as big as possible with student loan relief, and that means urging him to wait on canceling student loan debt. 3 Democratic senators want President Biden to go as big as possible with student loan relief, and that means urging him to cancel student debt. Politico reported that Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, and Raphael Warnock are requesting President Biden hold off on implementing any loan forgiveness via executive action until they can arrange a meeting with him. According to sources familiar with the matter, the 3 lawmakers want one last chance to push President Biden to go as big as possible, following the president's comments that he is not considering $50,000 in debt collection and debt cancellation for federal borrowers. Warnock's spokesperson told reporters President Biden told Senator Warnock months ago he wanted to meet about this issue, and Senator Warnock wants to make sure that the president hears why people in Georgia want strong debt relief before the White House takes any action. Folks, I definitely agree with President Biden, the Democrats, and even the Republicans in their push for stimulus checks. Schumer and Warnock have consistently pushed for $50,000 in relief, and they have long argued that canceling student debt is something that President Biden can and should do, using his executive authority. But Biden himself has not been quite so sure. While he pledged to approve $10,000 in forgiveness on the campaign trail, he expressed hesitancy with his authority to wipe out larger amounts of student debt early into his term. But as Warren and our colleagues have maintained, the more relief the better. According to data obtained by Warren's office and recently provided to Insider, while canceling $10,000 in student debt would zero out balances for a third borrowers, $50,000 in cancellation would wipe out debt for 72% of borrowers, or 30 million Americans. Warren said in a statement, the more President Biden cancels, the more we narrow the wealth gap among borrowers, and the bigger the boost to Americans' economic futures. This is the right thing to do. Gavin Newsom has just unveiled his latest record-spending proposal for the coming fiscal year. Riding a superheating economy and drawing disproportionately from the state's highest earners, the state is now projected to have a surplus bigger than California or any state has ever had, and significantly more than $76 billion that the governor had predicted in January. Roughly half of the surplus is required by law to be spent on education. That leaves only roughly $49 billion in discretionary money, but Governor Newsom wants to reserve 99% of that for one-time spending. That is $18.1 billion to provide relief for Californians buffeted by inflation, plus $37 billion for infrastructure investments. This is also including $5.6 billion for education facility upgrades, and an extra $2.3 billion for the ongoing fight against the crisis. Now the ball is in the state's legislature court, as lawmakers decide where they agree with the governor and which priorities they want to haggle over before June 15th deadline to pass the final budget for the fiscal year that starts July 1st. For the governor and Democratic leadership in the Assembly and Senate, having to gather billions of dollars during an election year is a good problem to have. The governor still wants to send $400 to most of the state's car owners. That's been the governor's idea to help drivers bear the cost of historically elevated gas prices in the face of pushback from environmentalists. Folks, I personally believe that President Biden should definitely do more for the American people and send out stimulus checks sooner than later. If you guys agree, tell me in the comments.
Constantly hear the critique of Medicare for All that it would take away people's private health insurance. As you said, people are losing private health insurance all the time because they got fired, they got laid off, they turned 65 and gained access to Medicare. So it doesn't make sense. Furthermore, that sort of churn, as we call it, the constant shifting in and out of medical plans, healthcare plans, has really adverse consequences for patient care. You could imagine if you have complex medical needs, having to see a number of doctors, having to go to particular hospitals. All of a sudden, your healthcare plan changed. Now you need to see all new professionals. Assuming you still have a new plan, you may be entirely uninsured and unable to see anyone at all. So it doesn't make sense, no.
Let me go to Ms. Castillo. If we had already adopted Medicare for All before the pandemic, how would things have been different for frontline nurses and their patients? Would our hospitals have been better prepared to protect patients and employees?
You know, and actually this just to relate to the previous questions, imagine, all those folks that lost their jobs in the midst of a deadly pandemic. So if we had Medicare for All before this pandemic started, hospitals would have been better prepared to respond. There would have been a system in place. For years, hospital corporations have used and relied on this just-in-time staffing and for supplies. And in most of the countries, hospitals didn't even hire enough nurses for regular patient care day to day, and that's pre-pandemic. They didn't have enough supplies for a public health emergency. Through the global budgeting payment mechanism that's in your bill, Senator, hospitals would be required to have the minimum nurse staffing levels, and they would be required to have a 1-year supply of the critical PPE and all the other medical supplies that were needed. So our pandemic response would have been much safer for patients and for healthcare workers if we had a Medicare for All system.
Thank you. Dr. El-Sayed, my conservative friends are supposed to worry about how much money we spend, right? That's what being a conservative is about. And I share some of that, I like to spend money. I was kind of a cheapskate mayor and try to continue to do that. So I just don't understand why my Republican friends are not jumping up and down and saying, Bernie, we're with you.
most taxpayers should not be surprised or necessarily worried if they received an IRS adjustment letter. Now, this letter usually concerns itself with detailing incorrect information entered on your filing. This information can be contested in dispute if you feel like an error has been made. And Yahoo News has said that if your letter requires a response or other action, take care of it as soon as possible. If you owe money to the IRS, you want to deal with it right away. Now, here's some big news from Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin is among the popular senators in the country after seeing his favorability skyrocket back home over the past year. Now, reports say that Manchin has faced backlash from progressives nationally. About 57% of West Virginia voters viewed him favorably in results. Now, his popularity jumped 17 points, which is more than any other senator compared to the same period last year. Manchin has frequently staked out his positions that found him at odds with the White House and progressive leaders. But I believe that President Biden, Democrats, Republicans, and Joe Manchin can do something for the American people.
Administration came into place. Of course, we're sitting on the largest untapped oil reserve in the world, amazing enough here in the United States. We've been utilizing this properly. Instead of launching on an assault on domestic energy production, our union would be in a much better state. Of course, as we know, on the first day in office, President Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline on and off over the years, suspended pending oil and gas leases, and halted domestic energy production.
And fair. And here's how. No one with an undergraduate loan today or in the future, whether for a community college or a four-year college, will have to pay more than 5% of their discretionary income to repay their loan. That's income after you pay the necessities like housing, food, and the like. You currently pay 10%. We're cutting that in half to 5%. And after you pay your loan for 20 years, your obligation will be fulfilled if it hadn't already been fulfilled, meaning you won't have to pay any more, period. And borrowers whose original balance was less than $12,000, many of whom are community college students, will be done paying just after 10 years. These changes will save more than $1,000 a year on average for the borrower. It's a game changer. We're also fixing what's called, and this has been the bane of driving me crazy when I was out of office, the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Now, this program forgives student loans to encourage those students who have those loans if they go and do public service. Think of the millions who are public school teachers, local police officers, workers at local charities, members of the military and the National Guard, and so many more. Think of the folks who work for federal, state, local, tribal governments, keeping essential services going, responding to natural disaster, all those firefighters and cops. The program is designed so that if you serve in one of these jobs, and we'll be able to list those and you'll be able to accurately assess whether you do, and make your loan payments for 10 years, even if it's not consecutive years, your remaining balance will be completely forgiven. It's a great idea, but the program's a mess. It's so inefficient and complicated, too many people just give up. Think if a service member defers their student loan payment